Good to see you as always. I have a reputation here in Israel, at least before Corona, for bumping into Israeli celebrities in various places. And I was hoping that was going to happen this week, but it didn't. And I was almost going to lie to make the story more interesting, but I wouldn't do that. So what am I talking about? You remember John Voight?
Yeah. Sure.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
He's in Israel.
Great
right?
supporter of our people and of
Yeah.
Israel. So he is in
Yeah.
Israel, making a new series in Hebron, that's called The Land of Israel, God's Story. And he's interested in people seeing the places where our people evolved, grew up. Now, this part you might not believe, but it is true. So I was thinking about this a few days ago. Last night, I had a dream that I met him. Now listen, in a video that he makes with somebody promoting the fact that he's in Hebron, he says the following: it is God's story, the land of Israel, and God was looking to share his glory with the Jewish people. And every time he made an experiment, he failed. But then he found this fellow, Abraham, and put his faith in him. Now, why is that incredible? Did I not say that same thing last week? Adam failed, Noah failed. I have found Lunsman with John Voight. And he's a couple of years younger than you, Fagel. But he's still, I find him to be very handsome. Very handsome. Anyway.
I had a handsome one. Oy vey. Oy vey, yes.
Okay. So as we conclude our time with the abstract thoughts and practical ideas of educator Michael Rosenak, Zichrono Livracha, let's restate his essential concerns. 1, how do we pass on the treasures of our Jewish civilization while protecting the freedom and dignity of today's learner? 2, how do we handle the dialectic between presenting tradition and nurturing openness? 3, how do we ensure engagement with our entire Tanakh? And what we mean by that is from the narratives to the laws to morality and the minute details of rituals. How? Through intelligent deliberation and ultimate questions. And finally, how do we inspire identity that is built on particularism and universalism? So how does a chapter entitled Priestly Garments and All That Still Splendid? Question. How does such a chapter find its place in this discussion? I will begin where Rosenak begins. I was teaching at Machon Lemadrichei Chutz Laaretz, the Jerusalem Institute for Youth Leaders from abroad. Merle also taught there years and years and years ago. And it's actually a 2-minute walk from where I'm sitting right now. Wow. And he says the following. Guys, I've got everything ready. Those were the days when the Shah still ruled over his various provinces and peoples. And there were often students from Iran at the Machon. One of these, on the last day of his stay in Yerushalayim, informed me confidentially that another member of his movement who was coming to the course the following year needed to be treated with respect. Why? I asked. Is he the head of your movement? No, he answered quite solemnly. In fact, the fellow that's coming is quite shy and not very knowledgeable, but he is special. You see, he's a Kohen, a priest. Though I felt like making a joke, Rosenak says, it was clearly no laughing matter to my student. I said, oh, I see, with all the solemnity I could muster, thinking that the shy and not very knowledgeable young man being sent, priest or not, was probably not very bright. Then I caught myself and thought again, wasn't it reasonable to assume that the young Kohen blessed my present pupil in the synagogue in Tehran on every festival in the name of God? So why should I think it funny for his friend to describe him as special? And yet there was something peculiar about his remark that I could not put my finger on. Some problem at the juncture where tradition and modernity were supposed to meet for me. Thinking now about this episode, I am struck by the image of the Kohen, the priest, in the Bible and what is left of priesthood in contemporary Judaism. How were priests special? Is it feasible to still see them or anyone else as special simply as a matter of birth? How does one approach such features of the tradition in a world wherein children, like adults, think that specialness depends on ability and character and not on class? What, if anything, is the large question here which educators wish to confront? Rosenak believed no conception of Jewish teaching can be complete without addressing every aspect of our tradition. One of the reasons, each aspect, no matter how it evolves, is a part of our specific historic community. Now, we never review history, though, just to know the past. A discussion on the clothing of priests, Kohanim, does speak to the issues of the day. And friends, I did not plan this, but it definitely, as I've thought about this, can speak to you as people who are part of a synagogue that is thinking what its future should be. I know you are talking about what is important for the future of the synagogue. What are the different age groups from 85 to, no, Isaac, you must be older than 85. All right, we won't go there now. And
Good.
A few more years.
the different age groups. Now, the one that interests me almost the most is I saw last week or so asking teens to respond to this questionnaire that you're sending out. But you're looking to really, really understand what you want the synagogue to be. And that's a global topic. And it depends on which country you're in, because I think the synagogue serves a different purpose here in Israel than it does on Bayview Avenue or Bathurst and Shepherd. So you need, for the future, to be wondering how all this comes together. So with that in mind, I'm going to share the screen. Okay. So I want to begin to delve into this subject by you helping me out here, looking at the terms that I have underneath these two lines. And just say what you think. The key words in the vocabulary of the Kohen, the priest, are choosing from this list. So which ones are you going to put with the Kohen and which with the prophet?
Wow.
Anybody?
Definitely sacred with the Kohen, and structure definitely with the Kohen, and honor. Those are the three I see.
Okay,
And
Michael.
I see blessing.
You see blessing.
Where is
Okay. Blessing's not here, but certainly, I don't know if I would put it just with the Kohen, but I know why you're saying that. Anybody else?
I think I would put compassion.
With the Kohen?
Yep.
Okay.
What about dignity?
Where would you put dignity? Emil?
Yes, with the Kohanim.
Okay, interesting. Michael, why did you say honor for the Kohanim? And then Emil, you tell us why you're putting dignity with the Kohanim.
Well, they were the servants at the temple. They're the ones who get the first aliyah. I think it's a dignified position.
Okay,
Exactly. It's
Michael?
a honor. It's a position of honor. They're elevated above the Levium and the Israel. So we honor them.
Okay. We see there that there is a difference, and we're going to go into that, between dignity and honor. We know that we give honor in the form of respect, hopefully to everybody. But does somebody want to, before I even look at the difference, want to try explaining a little bit more what the difference is? Think about that for a moment. Where would you put spontaneity? Priest or prophet?
Prophet.
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 definitely.
Okay, so Michael said structure, and he didn't just say structure, he said definitely with the Kohanim, and spontaneity with the Nevi'im. Now, what do we mean by that? How was the Navi spontaneous?
When Israel sinned, they would spontaneously, yell out against them. You can't do this. This is not what God wants. The Kohen never does anything spontaneous. Everything is laid down by law. He follows it.
Okay. Rav Jonathan Sachs actually put that this way, something similar to that, that the priest is focused on the God, the eternal God, the God of always, and the prophet, the God of today, of history, and dealing with each event as it occurred. Yes. Okay. Justice, where does justice go?
Again, definitely the prophet.
The prophet.
Now, isn't that sad that you're not assuming that it would go with a Kohen? But yes, in this context, you're right. Okay, so let's look a little more at this issue now. Arab Daniel Nevins says the following: modern Judaism has a problem with the priesthood. I imagine that there are some people sitting here now have a problem with it, and you'll voice that if I'm correct in a little while. The notion, but why, according to Nevins, the notion of hereditary holiness, that one segment of the Jewish people is set apart from others, given ceremonial privileges, and invited to bless the people, conflicts with our modern egalitarian ethos. The strange rituals of the priests, especially when they are invited to raise their hands in blessing, the people feel magical and irrational. Now, Nevins goes on to then said, thank God for such irrational and mysterious behavior. He finds something very positive in it. So either Michael, I think it was Michael rather than Emil, said before that the priests had honor, brought honor, in that they were given a certain position. Everyone is meant to be treated with dignity, but the honor here has more to say that there is a hierarchy. Let's withhold judgment. And now, Rosenak in the book calls upon sociologist, theologian Peter Berger to explain a little bit more the difference between honor and dignity. Honor occupies about the same place in contemporary usage as chastity. Both concepts have an unambiguously outdated status in the Weltanschauung of modernity. Honor is commonly understood as an aristocratic concept, or at least associated with a hierarchical order of society. Dignity, as against honor, always relates to the intrinsic humanity divested of all socially imposed roles or norms. It pertains to the self as such, to the individual regardless of his position in society. Whereas honor implies that identity is essentially and importantly linked to institutional roles, the modern concept of dignity implies that identity is essentially independent of them. In other words, what Berger is saying, we live in an age where people are more concerned with an individual's dignity and right to inalienable rights, and any identity that a person has should not be connected to a role that he or she plays in life. And so just to honor someone because they were born into that position doesn't make sense to modern Western sensibilities, if that's the way it's understood. Let us see more what Rosenak says to help us really understand this, because the thesis isn't going to be that we have to make the Kohanim, the issue that's going to save synagogues. On the other hand, what it stands for helps make the case that there is a need for synagogues, perhaps not lavish, but dignified synagogues. So Rosenak says, whereas in a world of honor, the individual discovers his or her true identity in roles to be played, it is radically otherwise in the world of dignity. There, one is taught to seemingly obliging historical traditions and proud consciousness of succession as mystifications and manipulations, and therefore as instruments of enslavement. Where there is honor, there are institutions through which honor is articulated. Institutions assign roles, but they have to create social expectations, enable people to place themselves in a social world if we want to function. Where dignity has conquered and reigns supreme, institutions have lost their power. What he means, if everyone is for him or herself, and that's the supreme value, then institutions are in trouble. Yet, without institutions, what really happens to identity? Berger and Kellner point out that when institutions become fragile, unstable, and even unreal, then the individual is thrown back on himself, on his own subjectivity, from which he must dredge up the meaning and the stability that he requires to exist. We all need to be inspired by the ideas we glean from Shul. This state of affairs is problematic, for we are social beings, and they claim that without honor, people cannot live in society. Now, I bolded this because this is crucial. Rosenak goes on, but there is a paradox here. He wants us to have these institutions and grand institutions. But there is a paradox here. One must be liberated from honor in order to have the individual freedom of a dignified existence. And at the same time, one needs honor and
Not
the
my
reality of being somehow enveloped in it. For just as there is no modern freedom and authenticity with dignity, so there is no bearable freedom without the structures that honor provides. So I want you to react to this. Do you see the institution of the synagogue in the same way that Rosenak sees it, Berger sees it, and Kellner? Do you have a sense of it being something that's on the decline? Do you see the need for it? Whatever your heart desires to say. Anyone?
Well, we, somebody's phone is ringing. As you know, Bracha, we're having many town hall meetings.
Please
to
mute
dis-
yourself. Not
We're
you,
having-
Stan.
Yes, we're having many town hall meetings to discuss the future of Beth Tikva. And now we're trying to reach out to get that younger cohort to fill out some of those surveys.
Yes.
And some of the young people as we know, are not interested in coming to shul or joining synagogues. There's a paradox at Beth Tikva. We are egalitarian in every respect, but we have duchenim. The Kohanim come up to the bima and go through the ritual of davening in front of the Holy Ark. And to me, that's great, because we can still have one foot in modernity, and yet we're retaining history. I mean, it's like the Ner Tamid hanging there. Why do we have that? So now I'm not sure what's going on in other conservative synagogues in the city. We're different halachically in some other respects to other synagogues. It may be that duchening with our Kohanim is one of them. I'm not sure. I haven't found that out yet. But to me, it adds an sort of what they call this radical amazement. Was it Solomon Schechter who said that? I can't remember somebody.
Heschel, Abraham
Heschel.
Joshua Heschel.
Heschel, yes. About being in shul and having to see a ceremony like that dates back thousands of years. So you could say, well, why are we doing that? We're egalitarian. There's no women up there, but you have to put it in perspective. This is history.
Okay, you're elaborating on Rosenak said. Thank you. Somebody else.
I have a real problem with this word honor. And it brought me up, this whole conversation brings me back to a conversation I used to have with Rabbi Marmer at Holy Blossom when I was working there. And one of his first questions to me always was, are you still duchening in your shul?
Uh-huh.
Because, I mean, he looked down upon that practice 100%. He felt that it was archaic. I don't happen to feel that it's archaic, but I happen to feel that we're living in an era of meritocracy where we expect that people are going to earn their honor. And the Kohanim do not earn their honor. They're just given it because they're born into it. It's the same way as you're hearing all of these stories about admission to major universities where students are being admitted because their parents were admitted. They're not being admitted because they're the best students to be coming into that university. It's because they have a history. And I really think,
Marlene, is that you? Try again.
I really think that honor has to be earned, that you just don't get it. In the same way that a person can be dignified, and they usually have to cultivate their dignity. I think in that same way that you have to cultivate honor.
Okay, well, that's what was said, that is something that makes it problematic in this age. And in fact, it's pointed out somewhere in Responsa that even if you have one Kohen up on the bima blessing, you still refer to them as Kohanim, because there is a chance that that Kohen that's up there, somebody can be sitting in the congregation and know something about the Kohen and feel what right does that person have to be blessing me. But let's say more about that Kohen. Yes, it is difficult. If you are aware of something going on with somebody who's up on that bima, it could be the Kohen that's blessing, or it could be somebody who is honored with an aliyah, but you know that he or she now is responsible for something terrible, not murder, but something that it just doesn't fit that that person is being honored. What we have to realize, to say it very simply and concisely now, is that the Kohen, it's not I don't want to say a name. I'm going to say Bob Cohen just because it's Cohen, but I don't want to refer. Bob's a great guy. It's not the person who's blessing you. It is the office. And he is just meant to be a representative. And we're going to say that further in another moment. I understand. But I think it also goes back to what Stan said in it being a part of our history. Now, by keeping it, it allows for us to have this discussion. Just as very quickly, you know that the silent Amida is called Shmona Esrei, 18 blessings, but there are 19 there. We keep it still as the 18th because the 19th was added on, and we want people to ask why, so we can explain why that added one. But keep that in mind for the time being, just to relate to that one specific issue that you have with it. Who is this person? Well, it's not now, and it wasn't then. The Kohen, it wasn't because they're supposed. Do you know that originally it wasn't even going to be the tribe of Levites that were going to have this role? It was going to be the firstborn who survived in Egypt. But once God saw that it was only the Levites who did not participate in what? The golden calf, then he chose them. They did earn that, he felt. But even then, it's not because of Joe Schmo, it's because of the position. And we know every institution needs people who are more involved in running the show, to say it very crassly, but it doesn't necessarily speak to them personally. Okay, so we'll get back to that. Let's go on. So we look to Parshat Tetzaveh in the book of Shmot for some answers about this, because Rosenak is concerned. We're trying to understand his thinking that we have to teach this priesthood and only teach it if we can make it applicable today. So we ask these questions. Can we really have both dignity and honor? And can honor be restored without artificiality? He wants genuine people in these roles. Now, what is the Torah reading for Yom Kippur morning? The service of the high priest on Yom Kippur. You can picture all the details that were given about Aaron sacrificing this and that. Anybody remember what the Haftarah is on Yom Kippur morning? Okay, let's say you don't remember. What would you suggest? Because you know that the Haftarah and the Kriyat Torah, the Torah reading and the prophetic reading, are usually connected and juxtaposed for a reason. So, knowing our tradition, what do you think would be the appropriate Haftarah, the Tochen, the content? You don't have to tell me which prophet, to balance the service of the high priest on Yom Kippur. I didn't hear. Sounded like somebody said something. Okay, what is it?
Book of Job?
Not Job.
Is it the story of Elkanah?
Elijah? That's on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so let's see. We take this
Yonah?
from the book of Yeshayahu, Isaiah. And you know that the prophets, they rebuked not only the Israelites, but also the priests often. It's as if the prophets were actually the Kohanim's supervisors. And so very often they're critical of the people. Why? Well, here, Bnei Israel, the Israelites, shout out to God. Why have we fasted and you, God, did not see? We have afflicted our soul, Yom Kippur, and you do not know. Behold, on the day of your fast, you pursue business, and from all your debtors you exact payment. What's being said here? They're being told, you're not sincere. And it goes on to say this. You're praying, your head's down, but how are you treating other people? You want debts to be paid back to you, even if people can't afford it right now. Behold, for quarrel and strife you fast, and to strike with a fist of wickedness. Do not fast like this day to make your voice heard on high. That doesn't matter to me, God says. Will such be the fast I would choose? A day of man's afflicting his soul? Is it to bend his head like a fishhook and spread out sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? Is this not the fast I will choose? This one I would like, to undo the fetters of wickedness, to unite, to untie the bands of perverseness, and to let out the oppressed free, and all perverseness you shall eliminate. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and moaning poor you shall bring home? When you see a naked one, you shall clothe him, and from your flesh you shall not hide. In other words, don't pray and then not know how to treat people. And that's an ongoing theme throughout the Nevi'im, the prophets. Now, let's see a little more about the prophets. I'll just read the English, and I'm purposely reading as much as I am. You shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. Who's this you? This is from Parshat Tetzaveh. It is one parsha where who isn't mentioned at all, but Aaron is the figure. Moshe, his name is not mentioned here at all, but he is the one that is being told to instruct the Israelites and to do A, B, and C for the Kohanim. I mention that only to make it clear to you again that Moshe, the prophet, is the one that is guiding these people of honor and making sure that they remain honorable in this sense. Aaron and his sons shall set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain, which is over the ark of the pact, to burn from evening to morning before God. It shall be a due from the Israelites for all time throughout the ages. You shall bring forward to your brother Aaron with his sons from among the Israelites to serve me as priests. Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar, the sons of Aaron. Make sacred vestments for your brother Aaron for dignity and adornment. Next, you shall instruct all who are skillful, whom I have endowed with the gift of skill, to make Aaron's vestments for consecrating him to serve me as priest. These are the vestments which they are to make: a breastpiece, an ephod, a robe, a fringed tunic, a headdress, and a sash. They shall make those sacral vestments for your brother Aaron and his sons for priestly service to me. They therefore shall receive the gold, the blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine linen. They shall make the ephod of gold, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and a fine twisted linen worked into designs. It shall have 2 shoulder pieces attached. They shall be attached at its 2 ends, and the decorated band that is upon it shall be made like it, of 1 piece with it, of gold, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and of fine twisted linen. Then take 2 lazuli stones and engrave on them the names of the sons of Israel, 6 of their names on the one stone, and the names of the remaining 6 on the other stone, in the order of their birth. On the 2 stones you shall make seal engravings, the work of a leopardry, of the names of the sons of Israel, having boarded them with frames of gold. Attach the 2 stones to the shoulder pieces of the ephod as stones for remembrance of the Israelite people, whose names Aaron shall carry upon his 2 shoulder pieces for remembrance before God. Then make frames of gold and 2 chains of pure gold. Braid these light corded work and fasten the corded chains to the frames, etc., etc., etc. Now, I want you to be honest. As I was reading that, and I intended on reading the 10 more psukim for a reason. Be honest. How did you feel when you're hearing me read that? I don't mean my reading, but when you see all of that.
To me, there is a big message here, because life is not made of individual little moments, but of continuity. Aaron Kohen got the honor of the Maccabim of the Chanukah because he lit the menorah every day. So I think something that you do consistently, not once here and once there, is what really matters. That's where you get your pinky stamps.
Okay, thank you. And somebody mentioned earlier the Ner Tamid,
Yes, he did.
the eternal light. That
But
word
Ner
Tamid
Tamid
is
is just-
repeated here several times.
Yeah, but
That
the
there
Ner-
is something, and that's what we said, that the
But-
priest represents eternal. Okay, anybody else? Thank you, Esther.
Not only the Ner Tamid, I think anything that you do constantly, if you put
Yes.
feeling every day,
Yeah,
it's something that you do out of habit. It's not now and then.
out
This
of habit, but not rotely. Absolutely. Somebody else?
I really saw it as a theatrical presentation. God was acting as the costume designer, and he was designing a costume for the high priest that was going to infuse his presence with a certain dignity and stature in front of the people. It's like when you see something magnificent on a stage, you're taken and you give an identity to that person because of the way they're being presented to you.
Now, to me, it sounded like you're saying that in a positive way.
But it is positive because
Okay,
it was meant to really add dignity to the role of the priest.
good, wonderful. Anybody else?
Yeah, Bracha,
Linda?
I see this as just a way of us connecting again. We see the importance that was placed upon this honor. And even though today we have vestiges and so much that remind us, and it's supposed to be evocative and inspiring of a tradition with which we are connected and were connected and will be connected. And so it's just part of knowing who we have been and will be.
Okay, important as well. Thank you, Linda. See, but we're speaking as people who are into this, if you know what I mean. I see Shari wants to speak.
Yeah, I saw it in a negative way. Like it's too much focus on the material world, pure gold and, and looks and, I know you need some identity, but it seems over the top.
Okay, I was hoping that we'd
materialism.
have at least one person make that statement. Anybody else?
Also, sorry, can I speak?
Yes.
Also, I agree with that. I think it's so opulent and so over the top that the congregation, the people out there, are really not going to relate to that in a way that they feel connected. I mean, it's like watching a movie. It's Hollywood. It's it's over the top stuff, but it's not my life. It's not what I live, how I live. And I think that's a way of alienating.
Actually, in Bracha,
Interesting. Yeah.
Agree.
I actually think that if we go back to the issue of how we're going to attract our younger generations of Jews into any kind of synagogue or communal life, then this paragraph would turn them off totally, in my opinion. That I don't think that we live in a world now where opulence is honored or respected in the same way it was even when we were growing up. I think opulence had played a different role. I don't see that role. I mean, we kid about it, like, what will our generation do with our sterling silver? Our kids won't want that. I mean, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that it is being somewhat involved in future programmatic challenges at Beth Tikva. I think this is a huge challenge that we are facing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. So I hope that you and Marlene are working together.
we will be. Marlene doesn't know it yet, but we will be.
Okay. So
I
understand what you're saying. And Rosenak presented it as it being a challenge, but he's going to make the case. Ultimately, what he's going to say is similar to what Marlene just said about the grandeur really moving you in a same way. Now, I know that there are some people who are not enthralled with a choir. And usually, most synagogue choirs, I'm not either, except for Fran Kane's choir. I'm seeing you, Fran, so that's why I'm saying you. But it's true. There's something about that choir that uplifted and raised and added something. And we're going to hear. So let's see what Rav Dov Linzer says to this question. Why the grandeur? Because a few of you have mentioned that you're struck. The question is truly challenging. And part of the answer, undoubtedly, lies in striking a balance. Now listen to this carefully, Merle, between what will impact people where they are and bringing people to where they should be. So he feels that people are impressed by grandeur. Okay, let's hear him to the end. Although we should look beyond superficialities and teach ourselves not to be impressed by them at a visceral level, being impacted by externals is part of our human nature. How a person looks impacts what we think of them. How a place or building looks impacts our estimation of it and its function. The beauty of the Mishkan impressed the people with a grandeur and a majesty befitting a house of God and instilled in them the proper sense of awe in their relationship to God. The paradox, though, is that once one internalizes this awe and understands how elevated, how infinitely different God is from the physical world, one should be propelled to be more like God and should not be swayed by externals or shows of wealth, opulence, but by things of true value, character, commitment, righteousness, and kindness. Yes, the opulence of the Mishkan, like the very phenomenon of any physical place for God, was necessary to reach the people where they were so that they could be elevated to where they needed to be. And somehow it had to accomplish this without reinforcing the values it was working to move people from. You see the challenge there. You have to move people, whether it's with the visual or hearing, but it's emotions that we know affect people and move people to action more than anything rational. We won't go into that now, but we know that's true. And that's the case that Linzer is making. Now, I want to look again to make something clear, that this focus on the clothing and the grandeur wasn't just for honor or the drama, but there's another message, and I'm saying those same psukim that I read before, wanting to quickly point out, again, in the red, you shall further instruct the Israelites. The prophet is behind what the Kohanim are doing. And who is going to bring the oil? All of the Israelites. Why is that important? It's not the Kohen himself. The prophet is there, and all of the Israelites are to be there. It shall be a due from the Israelites for all time throughout the ages. Stressing again, anything the Kohen is doing, yes, it's tamid for always, but it's with the Israelites. These are the vestments they are to make: a breastpiece, an ephod, a robe, a fringed tunic. Why? They shall make those sacred investments for priestly service to me, not for the priest's honor, but for God's honor. And then take 2 lazuli stones and engrave on them the names of the sons of Israel. And it explains 6 on one stone and 6 on the other. Why is that so important? Why is that so important? It's
legacy.
Making it quite clear that the Kohen, the priest, is just a representative of the people. And he is wearing these things, and he even wears some things on his clothing that make noise. So both it's on his heart, it's on his head, his body, and noise, all our emotions, that what he's doing, it's all to be reminding him he's not there for his honor, but on behalf of all 12 tribes of Israel. Now, you have a cantor, you have a rabbi, 2 rabbis in your shul, and there's a few people here from another shul, you probably even have more. Are they not serving the function of a Kohen? Are you going to quit your job at somewhere or wherever else you were and take on that function? You need people as these representatives. Aaron shall carry the names of the sons of Israel on the breastpiece of decision over his heart when he enters the sanctuary, for remembrance before God at all times. And on his headpiece you shall make the frontlet of pure gold and engrave on it the seal inscription, holy to God. Anyone, a further comment before I close with a beautiful text from Rav Jonathan Sachs. Francis? Yeah, Fran.
Okay. As the wife of a Kohen, I've got to tell you, he was picked out by a cantor he used to sing with, when he was a young boy, just past his bar mitzvah. And the idea that he was a Kohen, he went with the cantor to brisses and to things, and it made him feel very important, even though the whole family wasn't really religious. It changed his attitude because he had this responsibility and he took it seriously. I hope he did the rest of his life that seriously too, but he did. But it was something very important. But nowadays, you can't even get a Kohen at Beth Tikva, enough Kohen to go up on the bima at times. So it's probably at the end of its endurance or whatever. People don't really care. And even, Kohen's children now aren't impressed by the idea of being a Kohen. And yet most of the Kohens had to live by, some of the rules They couldn't marry a divorcee. They couldn't do, and most of them who did break these rules were very sorry. They really, if they were serious about it, then they were really upset with it. So maybe that's an era that's passed.
Bracha?
Bracha.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Yes.
make, I'd like to
Thank
make,
you, Fran.
I'd like to make a comment at the beginning of this, that you talked about the Mishkan and how the Mishkan had to be constructed in such a way that it was extremely impressive and it really invited the people to come in and worship as they should worship. Well, I think we've fallen into the trap of having a Mishkan that is impressive, but is not filled with dignity and honor. And I'll compare, and I'm going to be very cruel, Beth Tzedek with our own synagogue. I never felt comfortable going in to pray at Beth Tzedek and being spoken to from on high, where the building was extremely, extremely impressive. Rather, I enjoy coming to pray in a building that wasn't as impressive, was big, but not as impressive, where there was a community that was warm and welcoming and gave meaning to the prayer. And I think that going forward, I think this is what a lot of the synagogues are now coping with. They've got these white elephants, the buildings whose upkeep is extremely expensive, and they haven't put into those buildings what should make the building meaningful.
Yeah, Marlene, I don't think that impressive wouldn't be the word I want to use, but something that reflects that you are
Bracha,
being in the presence of God, and of course, the sense of community and being with people, et cetera, that's not to say that that's not as important. Of course, one doesn't deny the other. Shari.
Bracha, I have to say,
Okay, just let Shari speak and then Esther.
Yeah, I think the fact that, we interpret things differently, we can read the same passage, one can see it as positive, one can see it as negative. I think in my mind, it's not an either or. Do we need to preserve or do we need to just modernize? I think there's a place for both. You can never meet everyone's needs with one service or one type of service. I know when we used to go to I don't want to name names, but we went to kind of service where they had the traditional service in the main sanctuary, and then they had breakout sessions for people who wanted alternative services like drumming or meditation or discussion. So I think I commend Beth for asking people what it is they want, and I think the answer will be different. People want different things, and you can keep the traditional for those who want it and then modernize it for others.
Okay, thank you, Shari. Esther?
yeah. First of all, before what I had to say, I have to defend Beth Tzedek. I joined Beth Tzedek 10 years ago when I moved to Toronto. And the welcome and the warmth, never mind the building, but I became part of the community. If you go to shul for an identity, I can't think of a warmer, more welcoming people than I found at Beth Tzedek. And now, since COVID, there are so many programs, and they care. And living alone, because I'm a widow, I keep getting calls from the rabbi, even though they know that my daughter calls me twice a day. So that was in answer to talking about Beth Tzedek. I think it's how one person feels. I found them very warm and really belonging. And then you talked about the gold. I think gold was used in the Mishkan because gold doesn't tarnish. So and then you talked about clothes. I think through our Torah, clothes is important.
Bracha?
Yeah.
I think that the problem is not the opulence, but how we're missing the boat. You know, if young people are going to be turned off by this, it's our fault because we haven't educated them that this is to what this meant to us. And you know, today we still, all synagogues, Beth was a very beautiful synagogue. A lot was put into it. And I agree, you know, maybe the ceilings are a little high for feeling intimate prayer at Beth Tzedek, but they are a community. But I think
Yes, no, we're not doubting that.
But I think that we have missed the boat, you know, even for myself. I would look at this and say, you know, this is over the top. But that's a failing in not getting it.
Well, yes. But I think what's important is to respond to this feeling that the younger generation today, and with the people that are here, that's even talking about 60-year-olds and 50 and 40, etc., that, you know, that's my humor.
You know,
That you have to take from this idea of the grandeur in a positive way and awe that has lost its way in this generation. It's the next thing I think of is there something so terrible about families who have this seat is my father's and that seat is my mother's, for the message that's given, not looking to create, you know, that they're the powers that be, but it's symbolic of training us to have a sense of respect for the parent and then for God. I see these as tools for creating a sense, you know, at school in Toronto, I was so bothered when students were permitted to come, 14-year-olds, in sweatpants.
Mhm.
It might sound like something small, but I don't think it is. And when they had a basketball game at another school, then they had to dress in suits. And they held themselves differently when they were dressed that way. It's not about externals. We're not trying to say that. It's all of this as tools to say there is a place for being part of something bigger than myself, thinking of something grander than myself. And let's read what Rav Sachs, Alava Shalom, says about merging the dignity and honor. What makes loyalty, respect, and sanctity key moral values is that they create a moral community as opposed to a group of autonomous individuals. We need an institution. But I have to stop interrupting him, and then I'll read it again. Remember that Rosenak said, we lose students and younger people and older if we don't talk on an intelligent level. Too many teachers, too many rabbis water things down, and they forget that they're talking to people who have minds and want to be challenged. And that's got to be the essence. Intelligence, recognize that, but also that you're part of a collective. And that is a big challenge also to this generation. Loyalty bonds the individual to the group. Respect creates structures of authority that allow people to function effectively as teams. sanctity binds people together in a shared moral universe. The sacred is where we enter the realm of that which is greater than the self. The very act of gathering as a congregation, Beit Knesset, can lift us into a sense of transcendence in which we merge our identity with that of the group. Kohanim, brought into Judaism, was the choreography of holiness and respect that helped Jews walk and dance together as a nation. That explains the presence of the aesthetic dimension of the service of the sanctuary. It had beauty, gravitas, and majesty. In the time of the temple, it also had music. There were choirs of Leviim singing psalms. Beauty speaks to emotion, and emotion speaks to the soul, lifting us in ways reason cannot do, to heights of love and awe, taking us above the narrow confines of the self into the circle at whose center is God. The sanctuary and priesthood introduced into Jewish life the ethic of Kedusha, holiness, which strengthened the values of loyalty, respect, and the sacred by creating an environment of reverence. The humility felt by the people once they had these symbols of the divine presence in their midst.
Bracha, I have a question. I don't understand my grandchildren. They all went through parochial school and chat. They're married now. They send their children to Jewish schools. They have Shabbat, but they never go to shul. So how do you explain that? It's important enough for them to
Have you asked them why they don't go to shul? What are they not finding in shul?
Well, the answer I get that politics is religion is no subject for discussion.
Wow.
Well,
you know, it's important enough for them for identity to send their kids to Jewish schools. Yet they don't go to shul. They keep Shabbat, they keep all the holidays, they keep the tradition.
let me ask you, and you don't have to answer. They don't go to shul, but do they pray?
Oh. I didn't ask, but I assume no.
What do they do on Shabbat?
To them, the identity is very important to them, obviously.
Okay. What's more important though is you keep shalom bayit and don't ask them too much, okay?
It doesn't bother me.
No, the question is if they're looking for a type of shul, Merle and Marlene will call them and ask them what they're looking for, right? Okay. Rita, what do you have to say?
Well, I
seeing
think,
you now.
I think most of us have situations that are similar. The kids have distractions that we didn't have. There are so many things available to them that are very appealing and in many cases educational, and they take advantage of them. In fact, in our day, many of us as women didn't work. We were home. We had more time to spend discussing these options. Today, you're lucky if you get your kids to sit down for 10 minutes with you. So I think that whatever you offer them is not necessarily going to be an inducement. I think what I do take pride in with the current generation is that, yes, they may not come out on a regular Shabbat or whatever, but in crisis, they're there. I see what's going on at the TDSB, for example, now. The young people are doing a lot to move this riddance of anti-Semitism. So they do come together as community, but
yeah.
usually it's under duress, when there's a situation of duress.
Yeah, but that's identity as a
Respect some of
Jew.
that.
But that's identity as a people.
Well,
Yes.
that's part of
That's right.
That's part of us. I have heard this said many times before that in this generation, there are many more options and women are working. But somehow, I think something is missing still. Now, unfortunately, that makes the challenge. It isn't something that's natural, that you have to talk about getting people to shul, because we're living in an age where that's not automatic. And somehow
But you say
that's
you,
what happens. So it makes it,
but
it's a
the-
very, very big challenge.
But their example is different because my kids do go to shul every Saturday.
No, you're fortunate.
Well,
Bracha,
Yeah.
you brought up sweatpants. Sweatpants. That
Yes, yes.
another topic. It says a lot to what I was going to talk about. There's more to belonging to a synagogue than the building. It's
Of
the sense,
course.
it's the sense of awe, right? Because I remember as a kid, when it was like 2.5 months before Yontif, everybody would be saying, do you have your new suit yet? Do you get, how about, you need new shoes? So we would present ourselves Rosh Hashanah evening or Kol Nidre night with our grandparents and our parents. This was the special evening. There was a sense of literally of awe, of something important going on. The rabbi was wearing his special tallis. The cantor was in a beautiful new tallis with his big hat. And you had the feeling that this was something special because people were there not because they had to be there. And talking about dress, I mean, that was all not this business of being opulent, et cetera, et cetera. There's a fine line. The shul was opulent looking because it was a special night. Even the Torah covers, when the Torah was brought around, there were special covers on the Torah that someone had dedicated for Yom Tovs. So there was a specialness about coming to shul, and I think we've lost some of that. And I think there's other reasons, major reasons why a lot of young people, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, are not joining churches, they're not joining mosques, whatever. But I think there's something special about coming to shul for those occasions and on a Shabbat where you're not wearing your sweatpants, you didn't walk off the beach. I mean, I'm trying to say that there's a sense of awe that we've lost.
Yeah. And again, these are just meant to be tools to put people in a certain frame of mind. I have to tell you, I for about 30 seconds almost was going to put on the screen a picture of your former Rabbi Chazan with one of those big hats that he used to have to wear in Albany, New York as a Chazan. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Fran, is your hand still raised? I see something that's saying that.
I'm okay.
No?
Yeah.
Bracha,
Yeah.
it's Julia. We can't get the picture. So anyway, question.
Yes.
Having taught in parochial school where tefillah is mandatory every morning, I had such mixed feelings about actually there has to be an element of choice. I get it, but for children to be present during tefillah, but the disrespect, for the most part, the disrespect that was shown, I found absolutely horrific. The expectation was also that every student, male and female, wear a head covering, a kisui. You would have thought that you were asking them to dress like clowns. There was this refusal. And yet when I put the question to them that why the boys who were playing AAA hockey were okay wearing a suit to the arena for a hockey practice. That was okay. But putting on a kisui for half an hour of tefillah was punishment, and the lack of solemnity, the lack of reverence, I found absolutely chilling. How do we?
Quite right.
I don't know. How does one approach that? I don't know.
I'll tell you how one approaches that. You leave the school and you move to Israel. That had to be one of the most difficult times facing that, and knowing how to deal with the. You need to expose the students to the wonderful, beautiful idea of starting the morning with tefillah. On the other hand, when it turned into, in certain cases, a policeman's activity, awful. That is an eternal challenge. And by the way,
Yeah.
one of the principals at my school used to say that sometimes the students from an Orthodox shul were more difficult. Why? Because they were talking the whole time, because they were used to that at their shuls.
Right.
On the other hand, then you go to the other extreme where you have people in a synagogue setting that's sterile. There's a lot of work yet to be done.
Yeah, I mean,
really
it's you know, thinking of the head covering, it's like the one little symbol we were talking about, the clothing. It was like the one little symbol that was required. You would have thought it was punishment.
But why
Yeah.
the girls? Why the girls? I don't understand. Girls don't have to cover.
Because that was the philosophy of the school
the
that I know
school.
that Julia is talking about.
Because I was teaching in Talmud Torah in Montreal, and that was not required. The
No,
boys-
yeah, specific to the school that I was in. But anyway,
I
Yeah,
think that a lot of attitude of the kids today comes from the home. If they don't do Shabbat on don't do Friday night, and they don't recognize Shabbat in any way, and the parents never go to shul on Shabbat because they got to go shopping or they got to go who knows what. I think it comes from the home. I think the kids.
of course, that's a very, very important part, and certainly not something for today. Eva, I agree with you, of course.
But I had an experience when a parent came to me complaining why I did Shabbat in the classroom on Friday. And I said, if you have objection.
Why they wanted you to do it on Wednesday?
No, because then the kids wanted to do it at home. And then I said, if you have objection to that, then then don't send your child to a parochial school.
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
yeah.
That's,
Okay, anyone else? So Marlene and Fagel, happy birthday. And everybody else, happy week. And of course, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom, bracha.
Shalom.
Yasher koach.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Right.